Indirect restorations cover a pretty wide range of restorative options. In a nutshell, it's a restoration that can't be entirely fabricated inside the mouth. Instead, we typically use a lab or an in-office milling machine to create them. Indirect restorations can include crowns, bridges, implant crowns, inlays, onlays, and veneers. Within each of these indirect restorations, there's a number of subcategories, which we can get into at another stage. Indirect restorations are typically made out of 4 types of materials. 1, metal alloys. 2, ceramic. 3, composite. And 4, a metal-ceramic hybrid. Let's kick it off with metal. I don't personally use it very often, but I still think it's very important to know. Metal indirect restorations are strong, durable, and typically doesn't require as much removal of tooth structure. It's not the most aesthetic thing in the world, so therefore it's not very popular with patients. And some people do have allergies to the base metals. The main thing I would use it in a day-to-day basis within our practice would be potentially for a temporary Maryland's bridge for the wings and the substructure, or when we're doing all-on-4, we use a customized milled titanium bar to really reinforce the structure. But an all-on-4 prosthesis isn't really an indirect restoration. There are 4 types of metal, and I think it is important to know these because if you are getting patients who have had histories of allergies, you need to be able to let the lab know what you want to avoid. These 4 categories are 1, high noble alloys, which are greater than 60% in gold and platinum concentration. 2, titanium and titanium alloys, where the titanium content is higher than 85%. 3, noble alloys, where there is at least 25% of a platinum or gold group within the material. And 4, predominantly based alloys, which is where less than 25% of a gold or platinum group is present. One thing we talk about a lot in the mouth when it comes to metals is corrosion. Corrosion is the deterioration of metals by chemical interaction within the environment. And when it comes to the mouth, you've always got to think about the materials that you're using. The mouth is a very inhospitable place. You've got moisture, high temperature extremes, acidity, a lot of tensile and compressive force. Need I say more? The gold standard is actually gold. Pardon the pun. I'm such a loser. Gold has been used the longest in dentistry, and it's often referred to as the standard by which other materials are compared. Noble metals are comparatively thermodynamically stable and thus inert in a moist environment. Moist, making them ideal for use as a dental material. Because gold is so soft and malleable, it has to be hardened by other things like copper, silver, platinum, or other hard, durable metals. There are 5 types that are used for a variety of purposes, and here is a table just for your information. The other very popular metal material is a base alloy, and they were introduced in the 1980s. Because of an increase in gold prices, this led to the development and increased use of base metals. They have an oxide layer such as titanium oxide or chromium oxide. This reduces the rate of corrosion to extremely low rates. Yay! Nickel chromium and cobalt chromium are the most commonly used base metals. Cobalt chromium in particular is the classic cobalt chrome underlying denture prosthesis material too, so it gives you a bit of an idea of how hard and strong it is. Titanium and titanium alloys have risen in increasing popularity within the medical and dental field due to its low weight to high strength ratio, its corrosion resistance, and its biocompatibility. As I said, we use it as a custom milled titanium bar within our all-on-4 prosthesis. That is enough about metals because it's not my fave. Let's move on to the fun stuff. Ceramic. Now, I'll be honest, I used to get so confused by what different ceramic materials are out there because there are a lot on the market and you need to know what you're wanting to achieve and also what the tooth dictates, because ultimately, again, when there's disease and decay, we don't really have a choice. Ceramic has come a long way and it's just what patients want. Let me break it down for you. Ceramic is most commonly known as porcelain. There are 2 families that are the most commonly used in this space. 1, 1 are the silica-based ceramics, and 2 are the non-silica-based ceramics. The silica-based ceramics include feldspathic porcelain, leucite-reinforced ceramic, and lithium disilicate ceramic. In the non-silica-based ceramic camp, you have alumina and zirconia. Let's elaborate about the silica-based ceramics. They are my favorite. They are the most aesthetic and beautiful. I could not live life without them. Feldspathic porcelain is a silica-based ceramic. It's available to be sintered, pressed, and milled. If aesthetics are the #1 priority for a ceramic restoration, feldspathic porcelain is arguably the most cosmetic, largely due to its beautiful translucency. However, it is much more technique sensitive. There's so much artistry involved within it. Due to its lower strength, it's not recommended for people who are strong bruxers or in high wear areas like full coverage restoration. And then we come to leucite-reinforced ceramic. One of the more common versions, the humble IPS Empress. It's a silica-based ceramic available to be sintered, pressed, and milled. Leucite-reinforced ceramics contains up to 45% by volume of leucite. The leucite is able to create an aesthetic restoration that has medium values of flexural strength and compressive strength. Leucite-reinforced ceramics are also recommended for aesthetic cases. They're a bit less technique sensitive compared to the feldspathic, and while they're not recommended for posterior crowns, you can use them for inlays and onlays. And then there's lithium disilicate, which I feel like is the workhorse of our practice. It's very commonly known as Emax. It, again, like the others, is a silica-based ceramic. Oh wow, how original. And it is also available to be sintered, pressed, and milled. It's actually quite interesting the difference between an Emax pressed inlay and a Emax milled inlay, depending on the machine. You really need to make sure that your burrs are nice and sharp. It can compromise marginal integrity. But again, another story for another day. Lithium disilicate ceramics consist of about 65% by volume of highly interlocking lithium disilicate crystals dispersed in the glassy matrix. These ceramics have a high flexural strength compared to the leucite-reinforced ceramic. Lithium disilicate restorations combine strength with good aesthetics. They can be layered with feldspathic porcelain using the cutback technique, and the shaded ingots of lithium disilicate are available for blocking out darker stumps. That's all well and good, but I think we should probably break down the fundamentals, because we love fundamentals here, of what glass-based silica ceramics consist of. Silica comes in crystalline and non-crystalline form. Quartz is the crystalline version, and in dentistry, it's used as a crystal in investment materials, composite resins, and dental cements. It has a low melting temperature and a lower strength. Fused silica, which is the non-crystalline version, is used in dental ceramics. It's super strong because of its chemical structure. I never particularly did very well in chemistry, nor did I have an interest in it, so I am not the person to go for a deep dive with you on this one. But basically, the way that the oxygen bonds around the silica ion is super strong. But as a raw material, it needs modifiers so we can use it in dentistry because it has such a high fusion temperature. So pretty much you couldn't heat it up high enough in a traditional dental lab setting with the kilns that we have. If you were trying to layer it over any metal or underlying ceramic, it would just be a hot mess because it would end up melting and warping everything. So how do we change that? This is where glass modifiers come in. Again, more chemistry. Things like carbonates of sodium, potassium, or calcium are added to make those stronger bonds more flexible. With that said, the melting point still ranges between 800 and 1500 degrees depending on the material. The more glass modifiers you add, the weaker and more susceptible to saliva the ceramic becomes. And so therefore, it's a little bit like a Goldilocks situation where we're trying to get that balance right. And it also devitrifies the crown, which means that it makes it ugly because it increases the opacity, making it unesthetic. And in the world of cosmetic dentistry, we love translucency. Based on the cocktail of fused silica and glass modifiers you create, you end up with a material that falls into fusing categories. Here is a table of those fusing categories. Unless you're a lab technician, you probably don't need to think too much about it. I would recommend just follow the instructions from the manufacturer. That's a really good start, but it's handy to have if you ever are curious. Another component that's often added is Feldspar. It's potassium, aluminium, silicate. In Australia, we say aluminium, and I know other parts of the world say alumina, so sound off. Tell me which way is the right way. This has two functions. Function one is that when you heat it to fusion temperature, it softens and forms a glass phase, and within this, the silica particles can flow and fuse together. This is known as liquid phase sintering. The second function is called incongruent melting. What this means is when a material melts, it forms a liquid and a crystal. That liquid previously mentioned in the glass phase helps with sintering. Now, this is where things actually start to get interesting because leucite, as we previously mentioned, has high esthetics and also has a high coefficient of thermal expansion. There is also boric oxide. It's a little spicy boy that's added that can also act as a glass modifier and helps with feldspar forming the glass phase. And last but definitely not least is our pigments. Here is a list of the most common pigments. They are also added to obviously give character, because I think a lot of people don't realize, even though you can have a beautiful BL1, BL2 veneer, which is beautiful and white, to do that right, you actually need a rainbow of colors within that porcelain. There is a level of opalescence. I guess that's why they call them pearly whites. But that pearlescent feature gives it that beautiful lifelike quality, also tied in with the texture that's created on the surface. Basically, you mix it all up and end up with a variety of the silica-based ceramics. The more you know, hey? Couple of things to note. We need to think about how we treat the ceramic as well to further enhance its strength. And here's a couple of life hacks of how people like to do that. Hack 1, you can reduce the cracks, and this can be done through the glazing process. You can either self-glaze, which involves controlled heating of the ceramic so that the top layer selectively melts and fuses, which reduces the formation of microfractures. Or you apply a glaze made of silica with a lot of glass modifier in it so that it's flowable and it can seal over any microfractures present. Hack number 2, the introduction of residual compressive strength. Tensile force is a stretching force. Compressive force is a force that presses inwards. This gets pretty meta, but basically, materials are engineered with inherent compressive force to counteract the tensile and bending forces found in the mouth, which makes it harder for cracks to open up. How do they do this? With the magic of chemical tempering, thermal tempering, and thermal coefficient mismatching. Again, that is a rabbit hole that I will not be jumping down. Probably ever, because that sounds really complex. Hack number 3, interruption of crack propagation. This is achieved through dispersion of crystalline phase, which is where you mix alumina or zirconia into the ceramic to make it harder for cracks to travel. Or transformational toughening. This is where you use partially stabilized zirconia and it undergoes a stress-induced transformation. The stress changes the form of the zirconia and the crystals become larger, which kind of compresses the cracks. Typically in crowns where aesthetics is required, you're able to use a zirconia or alumina porcelain on the deeper parts for increased strength and layer feldspathic on the outer layers. And the 4th hack is all about the prepping and the design. You want nice, smooth, rounded edges so that there's no sharp points, because sharp points mean excessive stress. And now you know a lot about silica ceramics. Let's talk about the non-silica ceramics. The most common is zirconia, also known as zirconium dioxide. This ceramic has become one of the most popular types of all ceramic restorations available today. It's actually derived from zirconium, the metal, but because of the oxidization and its formation into zirconium dioxide, it's considered a ceramic. It can be utilized in labs or in office through CAD/CAM technology for fabrication of copings, crowns, bridges, and implant abutments. Zirconia is milled dry in a green phase or a pre-sintered state and then sintered, during which the material shrinks about 20%. So that's something that the software will take into consideration. The sintering of the zirconia coping has a very high flexural strength. After a coping is fabricated, a silica ceramic can actually be pressed, stacked, or milled over the zirconia coping, creating a unique blend of strength and aesthetics. Partially stabilized zirconia, especially yttria-stabilized zirconia, also known as YTZP, is the most common zirconia-based ceramic used in dentistry. When you're playing with porcelain, whether it be silica-based or non-silica-based ceramic, it can either be monolithic, which is one material, or layered, which can comprise of two materials and requires typically more space to be prepped for the material. Okay, so we know about metals, we know about ceramic. What else is there? You can also use composite for indirect restorations. Resin matrix composites are capable of high degrees of filler loading and polymerization than the ones you would typically use directly inside the mouth. And because they're cured outside of the mouth, the polymerization shrinkage does not occur as it does in direct resin matrix composite restorations. CAD/CAM composite resin blocks for indirect restorations can be more biocompatible than their direct composite counterparts. They generally consist of these ingredients, and we're going to talk about those in the next video about direct restoration materials, because I think you've had enough science for today. One thing to note with composite resin blocks, you also find inclusions of materials like silica-based glasses, glass ceramics, zirconia, and or silica zirconia ceramic fillers, which I feel like I've already said, but hey, it's on the list. That adds a bit of a different dimension to what is achievable with composite out of a tube. The research has shown that resin matrix composites in the form of composite blocks have more flexibility to masticatory stresses with lower abrasivity, is that a word? Apparently, to opposing teeth. But they do have lower flexural strength and fracture toughness than the typical CAD/CAM blocks. And we're almost there, we're almost done. Metal ceramics. Probably the most common and the one that we always were told to do at university is the humble PFM, also known as porcelain fused to metal. The metal originally was designed to reinforce the porcelain. The issue is there's no translucency. To think back at uni, I thought they were aesthetic. The thickness of material you require for adequate strength, you have to do a significant amount of prepping. It relies on a mixture of mechanical retention and chemical bonding. The mechanical comes from how you prep the two. The chemical comes from the oxide layer of the metal and the metal oxides of the ceramic. The reason why we have a metal oxide layer able to form is because of the presence of a small percentage of base metals like iron, indium, tin, and nickel. Something to note, particularly I find with nickel, I have heard of a lot of patients having issues with allergies around this. You get women, for example, who say that they can't wear those store-bought earrings, the cheap earrings. They have to wear like precious metals, gold, pure sterling silver. If they have issues like that, it's a pretty good sign that they may end up having troubles with base metal alloys in the mouth. Not that I use metals very often, but that is something to bear in mind. Look at us, fun facts galore. And another one that's become popular over time is the whole concept of porcelain fused to zirconia. One thing to note with zirconia as well is when you cut it, it sparks up. So maybe give the patient a little heads up on that one. So now we've covered the indirect materials. You guessed it, we're gonna do the direct materials next. Yay! But as I said, it's important.